But after that major documentary comes out on Diddy, then you're going to start to hear more and more about JayZ and his nefarious past. Okay.
How do you just have this be so one-sided? It is, I mean, it's such a miscarriage of justice. This is not what justice is supposed to look like. It's just, it's incredibly disappointing.
Rumors surrounding some of music's biggest names have reignited after new leaks and legal filings allegedly linked to the Epstein investigation began circulating online, with speculation claiming that a powerful celebrity couple may have attended private gatherings that authorities have kept heavily redacted from public records. Insiders suggest the Department of Justice has released less than 1% of millions of pages tied to the case, fueling suspicion that key details remain buried, while lawsuits and resurface accusations, including a refiled 2000 case naming JayZ alongside other high-profile figures, have intensified scrutiny. At the same time, reports about sealed settlements, protected identities, and delayed disclosures have led critics to question why so much information is still being withheld if the events were merely social in nature. Legal teams are reportedly moving aggressively to control narratives and limit online speculation, even as Congress pressures agencies for transparency. With another document release expected and whispers of VIP guest lists that could implicate influential people across entertainment and politics, uncertainty continues to grow, casting a shadow over upcoming projects and tours. For many observers, the biggest story isn't what has already surfaced. It's the vast amount of evidence still locked away, and what might happen if those files ever become public.
And that's the problem that I have with this whole situation. But I am going to save this conversation for JayZ. JayZ, you're watching. I know you're watching because you got people calling me. Stop having people call me. You can call me yourself. You know how to get my number. You know you got people calling me. Call me yourself, because this right here is going to go viral. The way my job works on the internet, everybody's going to be clipping, sharing on TikTok. Watch this.
The Department of Justice's delay in releasing the Epstein files has hit a breaking point, with Congress now threatening contempt action against Attorney General Pam Bondi as pressure mounts for full transparency. And the limited documents made public so far have only deepened suspicion rather than eased it. According to reports and legal filings, the names of major celebrities, including Beyonce and JayZ, allegedly appear in heavily redacted sections that place them closer to key events than previously understood, raising questions even among judges overseeing the case. At the same time, Ghislaine Maxwell has filed motions from prison identifying dozens of powerful men who quietly settle with accusers without ever facing charges, reinforcing concerns that influence and connections may have shielded high-profile figures for years. Critics argue the DOJ's slow rollout looks less like caution and more like concealment, especially as insiders claim some records describe more than casual social gatherings and instead reference specific dates and locations that demand scrutiny. Adding fuel to the fire are resurfaced lawsuits, old travel logs, and renewed allegations that have triggered aggressive legal responses and attempts to control the narrative. With deadlines missed, documents trickling out, and another major release looming, the controversy now feels less like isolated accusations and more like a larger battle over what the public is allowed to see. Because for many observers, the real story isn't what's been disclosed, but what remains locked away and who might be protected if those files never fully come to light.
You have some breaking news that we want to bring to you. It was being reported by TMZ and now Fox News. We are learning that JayZ is accused of a 13-year-old girl. That is new in the Diddy lawsuit. And
the real tension isn't in what's already been released, but in what remains locked away, as the Department of Justice admits it has uncovered hundreds of gigabytes of Epstein-related material, including video and audio files, while making only a tiny fraction public. A gap critics say feels less like caution and more like control. Among the few documents that have surfaced are vague references to ceremonial participation, language that some interpret as implying more than simple attendance, though the details remain heavily redacted and unconfirmed. At the same time, Beyonce's silence has drawn attention, with no public statements or formal denials, a strategy some observers read as deliberate restraint rather than neutrality. JayZ's legal team, meanwhile, has reportedly pushed back aggressively against renewed scrutiny, allegedly contacting media voices and influencers to curb speculation around broader connections, while figures like commentator Jason Lee have publicly expressed fears of pressure and intimidation. Even broadcaster Piers Morgan retracted previously aired allegations after legal intervention, editing segments and issuing an apology, a move that fueled claims of behind-the-scenes damage control rather than open debate. With missed deadlines, partial disclosure, and thousands of pages still sealed, the central question for many isn't whether the existing files prove anything definitive, but why authorities appear so reluctant to release everything at once. Because a growing suspicion isn't about what's visible. It's about what might still be buried in the remaining trove of records, tips, complaints, and travel logs that have yet to see daylight.
And never was part of the Epstein files. She was sentenced in 2025. This was an interview by Trump's lawyer to protect Trump from the fallout about the Epstein files. What this really is nothing but a sketchy PR stunt by the Department of Justice. And we have seen this movie before. The Maxwell interview is to the Epstein files what the Barr letter was to the Mueller investigation.
The most revealing part of the Epstein controversy may not be in the documents themselves, but in the reaction surrounding them. The Department of Justice's repeated delays, aggressive legal defenses from high-profile figures, carefully maintained silence from others, and a wave of prison filings and resurfaced lawsuits that together create an atmosphere of tension rather than transparency. To critics, these moves don't look like coincidences, but like a system protecting its own, where information becomes leverage and sealed records function like a hidden ledger of power. The 29 unnamed men referenced in recent court filings, the partial disclosures, and the hundreds of gigabytes of unreleased data have fueled suspicions that what remains buried could be more significant than what has already surfaced. Even the smaller details, old travel logs, scattered emails, long dormant accusations, and fragmented evidence, are being re-examined as potential clues rather than footnotes. As each new release is delayed or heavily redacted, the sense grows that the real story isn't simply about individual names, but about a broader network of influence operating behind the scenes. For many observers, the files feel less like paperwork and more like a ticking clock, with every withheld page raising the same uneasy question. Not just what's inside, but who stands to lose the most if everything finally comes to light.
I know so much on how you got where you are, how you stepped on many people.
What's becoming increasingly clear is that the real drama isn't just in the Epstein files themselves, but in the frantic efforts surrounding them. The delays, the redactions, the legal pushback, and the silence from powerful figures who seem determined to keep the full story from surfacing. As the Department of Justice stalls and public patience thins, critics argue the fight is no longer about disclosure, but about control, with each missed deadline and partial release fueling suspicion that something bigger remains buried. Resurfaced lawsuits, old travel records, scattered emails, and prison filings have reignited scrutiny around influential names in entertainment and politics, while aggressive legal defenses and carefully managed media responses suggest a coordinated effort to contain the narrative. Observers point to high-profile retractions, edited segments, and commentators claiming pressure as signs that the conversation itself is being tightly managed. None of it proves guilt, but together it paints a picture of a system closing ranks when threatened, where information becomes leverage and the remaining trove of unreleased data feels more consequential than what's already public. For many watching, the files no longer represent just another scandal. They feel like a countdown, with each leak, lawsuit, or disclosure raising the same uneasy question. Not simply what's inside those records, but who might be exposed if every page finally sees the light of day, and how far the powerful might go to make sure that moment never arrives.
And it was pretty much said like, Jay doesn't really want awards. Well, he go to the Grammys.
Right.
He you know, come into the Black-owned spaces. Let's figure out how to work together so that way we have the relationship when it matters, not when it's convenient for you and your image. Because they all call us when the story is up that they don't like.
What's becoming clear to many observers is that the Epstein files aren't just a stack of court records, but a window into how power protects itself, with every delay, redaction, and partial disclosure raising more questions than answers. Critics argue the Department of Justice's slow rollout looks less like simple bureaucracy and more like cautious negotiation, while filings from Ghislaine Maxwell, sealed settlements, resurfaced lawsuits, and renewed scrutiny around influential figures have fueled speculation about a broader network of influence that has long operated behind closed doors. None of these elements alone prove wrongdoing, but taken together, the missed deadlines, aggressive legal defenses, carefully managed public statements, and the steady drip of documents, they create the impression of a system working overtime to control the narrative. To many watching, the real tension isn't about what has already been released, but about the vast amount of information still withheld, and how each new disclosure could shift reputations overnight. In that sense, the files feel less like history and more like leverage, not just a record of the past, but a reminder how the powerful respond when scrutiny gets too close, leaving one lingering question at the center of it all. Not whether more will come out, but how far people might go to keep certain truths from ever surfacing.
Nah, I would want, why?
Just to talk to or answer face to face.
One answer.
What makes the Epstein story feel darker to many observers isn't just the crimes themselves, but the possibility that his operation exposed something bigger. An entire ecosystem of influence where powerful people could avoid scrutiny, allegations could be quietly buried, and reputations could be protected through connections rather than accountability. Critics argue the files are starting to look less like simple court records and more like a map of how the system works, with the Department of Justice's delays, heavy redactions, and staggered releases fueling suspicion that authorities are managing fallout as much as pursuing transparency. None of the fragments released so far offer definitive answers, but the pattern, missed deadlines, sealed settlements, resurfaced lawsuits, strategic silences, and aggressive legal responses, has created the impression that those with the most to lose are working hard to control the narrative. To many watching, the real tension isn't in what's already public, but in what remains sealed. Because each upcoming disclosure feels capable of reshaping careers and rewriting reputations overnight. In that sense, the files represent more than a single scandal. They hint at a broader reckoning, one that challenges how power has operated for decades, leaving a growing sense that the next release, the next name, or the next revelation could change everything, and that whatever comes next won't just revisit the past. It could redefine the future of the entire industry.
Beyonce and JayZ will do anything to destroy anyone who speaks out against them.
What many people are starting to suspect is that the Epstein files aren't just about one man's crimes, but about the larger system that allowed them to happen in the first place. An industry culture where influence could outweigh accountability, where uncomfortable allegations might be quietly sidelined, and where careers could rise or fall based on power and connections rather than truth. Critics argue this is bigger than backroom deals or gossip. It points to a structure that protected insiders for years, which is why the files feel less like paperwork and more like a reckoning, with the Department of Justice delaying releases and public pressure building. The focus has shifted from whether the documents will surface to what happens when they finally do, because each new disclosure could expose not just actions but complicity, who knew, who stayed silent, and who tried to steer the narrative. To many observers, the records resemble a ticking clock, with every withheld page adding to the sense that something significant remains hidden, and that when the full picture emerges, it could reshape reputations, industries, and the way power operates behind the scenes. In that light, this isn't just another scandal story, but a potential turning point, one that suggests no position is permanently untouchable, and that whatever comes next may not simply revisit the past. It could change the game entirely.